Welcome to Radio Free South Africa. This is your host, Karen Smith. You will recall that a couple of weeks ago we tried really, really hard to have a chat with Tom Bowie, but everything went wrong that night, and after less than 45 minutes we were unable to keep the show on the air. So tonight we have rescheduled with Tom. Tom is the vice presidential candidate for the American Freedom Party, and just an ordinary guy like you and I, but he's had a very spectacular life, and at the moment he's doing something that I would love to do. He's road tripping. So welcome, Tom.
Good evening, ma'am. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So, Tom, please tell us about the week that you've had, because you started out on last Monday.
Yes, ma'am. It's been a fairly long week. I've never been one for traveling. For tonight's call, I had to find someone with a landline to connect. I'm up in the hills of West Virginia, where cell phones do not work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So
I don't expect I'll have any type of cell phone coverage until about Saturday, when I get far enough away from the mountains.
So tell us how you started out and what you're doing.
Well, I started out as what people try and claim as a anti-racist, meaning I was a brainwashed anti-white who supported every other race but never looked to help his own race, as I had been conditioned to do. I think one of my earliest experiences is finding out about the Afghana Boer genocide in South Africa and Rhodesia. And earlier that one day, I signed a petition about the Tibetan genocide. And I also found a petition to sign about the white genocide going on in South Africa. And what I was called changed in just the few hours of that day. When I was objecting to the Tibetan genocide, everybody who's politically correct thought I was marvelous and some sort of, social justice warrior. But when I signed and objected to the ongoing program of genocide against the white South Africans, suddenly I got called a Nazi.
So you discovered that your previous thought of, anti-white, whites are privileged, whites have got things that other people don't have, suddenly got a shocking awakening. That actually
I was already on the path, seeing that this could affect our own people. But this is the first time it had been put into words. And that was only my beginning. I've learned that our race has to awaken multiple times, and they can awaken multiple times. Our race is not racial by nature, and that is very racial.
Yes, we tend to be live and let live, don't we? But at the moment we are under threat, and we have to wake up and stop being so casual about life and about our race.
Yeah, the programming, good social programming, a form of brainwashing, takes advantage of what's already there. And because our race is not naturally racial, it takes advantage of that and prevents us from coming to sort of a racial awareness that we normally would. It doesn't so much teach us what to think in many ways as what not to see. We are turned to the point where we can't actually see and learn the differences in the races, even if we instinctively know them on some level. It still blinds us to them.
And you think that is a kind of early life and throughout life brainwashing of ourselves?
Yes. And it's self-reinforcing. And it's contagious. Right now, the average person sees it on television, hears it in the radio, they get it on the internet, and it's all objected down and aimed at one race. When you see the propaganda that most people call race mixing, well, it's usually, I've never encountered more than a rare few instances when it was race mixing. It's in fact white mixing. All of the essentials for this is some white person to blend with another race. You usually don't see the promotion of blacks and Asians per se. It's usually a white person blending with someone else. It's all on a deep psychological level. We are creatures in many ways of light and sound, and they project on the television this beautiful picture and the words to go with it to convince us that this is right and normal, but only for white people and in white countries.
Yes, I read a whole article the other day that if you are not mixing physically with a black person, you are definitely a racist. It is racist to be determined to mate only with your own race. And I was horrified that it's so in your face and blatant these days that if you don't have a black other, you're a racist. It's horrifying for me.
Yes, that's pretty much become the norm. They didn't originally get that blatant with it, but they brought up a generation under this propaganda to the point where they've exceeded what they were initially taught. I've also seen at universities where the professors who are fully indoctrinated in political correctness pass that on to their students who already had a background in it coming from the public schools. And their students even exceeded them. And the professors were upset because now they were being called on any hint of potential breach of political correctness. It self-accelerates past the point of absurdity.
It does, Tom, because this week, last week, there was a professor in South Africa who said that all white people should just kill themselves and die without breeding. So he was asked, are you now going to set the example and kill yourself first? And he said, no, he's not ready to die yet. So in other words, everybody else must do it, except the elite few.
Yes. And you can judge people by how they treat the helpless. In essence, they're pushing this propaganda and this inevitable future where whites are a minority on children and unborn, the helpless. They're not pushing it on adults who at least can practice something like I'm doing, white flight, or they can resist in some way like I try and do.
Yes.
They're pushing it on the helpless, the truly helpless, some who aren't even born yet.
Well, I've seen that even in preschool, they are teaching them that to be white is to be guilty. I mean, you must be ashamed of being a white person. Now, I don't understand that because you did not choose what color you are born. And those poor little kids are being taught shame, white guilt, that they've got privilege that others haven't got. And it's awful, because how do you brainwash an entire generation of children into guilt and shame because of their color?
I believe in part that's racial too. If you look at the history of the world, our ancestors thought they were evil sinners going to burn in hell. Our people naturally have a hyper-developed sense of conscience, and they feel guilty about real and imagined imperfections in themselves. And for me, it's the reverse since I've become awakened. It's not that I feel great pride and love of my race because of some perfection. It's rather the fact that they are so imperfect. They've been hammered with such propaganda, and yet they still endure and begin to rise up again. That in itself is marvelous.
We have that ability, don't we, to really be beaten down and rise up. And that's one of the things that I'm so proud of the Boers in South Africa, because throughout their history, they have been beaten, slaughtered, literally spat upon, and yet they built an incredible first world country. They created and invented stuff that one can't even, there's such a long list we can't even think about it. And yet they are humble, peaceful, gentle people. And I'm very, very proud that they have endured, as you just said, endured and risen above it to create something beautiful.
Yes, someone once said that our people are at their best when things are worse. And it's very true. We can overcome adversity. Some years ago, they had the Hurricane Katrina, and there was much carried on the news in the United States about New Orleans, which was a predominantly non-white area, and how horrible things were. But that hurricane struck other towns that were predominantly white you didn't hear about. Rather than complain and demand someone help, they pitched in. No one organized them. They just showed up because things were now bad, helping one another, looking for survivors, providing each other with food and water. And that's a perfect example. You didn't hear about them because all hope wasn't lost for them. They had achieved what they could achieve in times of great hardship.
Yes, and they do that endlessly. It is just an amazing thing, because I'm thinking of the Dunkirk rescue during the World War. I mean, that was an amazing thing. You had an entire army stranded on the beach at Dunkirk, and everybody who had something bigger than a rowboat just jumped in, went there under heavy fire, and rescued those guys off the beach and brought them home. I mean, we just do that kind of thing.
Yes. And if you look at if you read around a bit, we do that universally too. If you do search animal rescues, predominantly what you will find are our people rushing into burning buildings, lowering themselves into chasms in order to rescue some poor animal. Through the rest of the world, you may occasionally see a story about someone in India or Pakistan rescuing their family cow, which is really a food source. It's not a pet doggy or cat.
Yes.
And on an emotional level, at least, we don't differentiate not only between races, but between species. We will rescue a cat as if it were a child in danger.
Yes, yes. we do, because our pets, and by if you stretch that out, everybody's pets. I mean, you see a dog in problems, you stop and help it. It's just automatic.
Oh, yes. And occasionally people will stop to some injured animal along the side of the road, a dangerous animal, and be mauled or risk being seriously hurt in order to try and rescue it. And even if they are mauled, they usually are successful in saving it, despite having a gnawed-up hand or something.
Yes, yes. And we don't even think about it, Tom. That's the point. It's not something that we consider. We just do it automatically. Another example of those kind of things is in South Africa. The black people do not donate blood in general. There are obviously some who do, but in general they will not donate blood, and they do not donate organs because they believe that they're going to meet their ancestors when they die, and so they have to be complete, a whole person. But they accept them very gratefully from the white people.
Yes. As a matter of fact, some years ago in the United States, one of the organ donor programs that was in a predominantly black area was the federal funding was cut off and it was shut down because the only people, for the most part, registering were white people. And somehow or another it was deemed inappropriate. And it wasn't for any grounds other than the blacks, who made up the majority of the population, just really didn't care about donating their organs. And somehow or another that was a bad thing, so they shut the program down. Yes,
yes. Well, you know, I've lived with that for half a century, and I've always been amazed that the very people who will riot if there are not enough organs available for somebody that they're punting for, but donate, not a chance. And because they are the vast majority of people, there are not enough of us to give to them. And I foresee riots coming about that, because they riot about everything.
Oh, yes. All it takes is a spark. Sometime back, a gentleman who runs a website by the name of Andrew Anglin, he, during the Missy Lou protests, where they were screaming about racism, he and a few of his people started putting out false stories of the Klan being on campus, and they believed it. What he demonstrated, what his intent was, and what he successfully demonstrated was these people have been propagandized to the point about hating white people that they can be stirred up very easily and by anybody.
Yes, yes, very, very easily. And unlike us, because, Tom, we don't seem to have the herd mentality either. We don't easily form rioting groups, masses of people. And if we do organize a group, it is so structured and taken care of. Every detail is taken care of so that it doesn't become a mob. But the other races become mobs without any spark to set them on it.
Yes. Something that was found out early in American history, or it probably was already known, but I know it from American history, is when there would be a mob in the old settlement days, say in a western town, there would usually be only one or two leaders who are actually organizing it. If the local law enforcement simply handled them, the mob would disperse. they could arrest them or whatnot, because our people are basically still, even in such a mode, very law-abiding. Many of the laws today are highly destructive to our people, yet we still try and follow them. It's only when we realize the extent of how harmful it is that our people will start to ignore the laws and seek an alternative method to preserve their self and their race, that they will begin to think of themselves as a people.
Yes, yes. Do you think that we think of ourselves as individuals rather than part of a culture, a civilization, a group?
To a large extent, yes. Naturally, we think of ourselves as quite individualistic. But part of the social conditioning we've been through actually accelerates this and makes us more individualistic than we would normally be. Because in the past, we always associated ourselves with our group, our family, our extended family, our tribe, in addition to ourself. And this self-individualism that's there has been accelerated in the same way they've taken advantage of our natural propensity for guilt.
So, Tom, who is behind the accelerated assault on white people?
Oh, that's a broad question. I lump them all into one group as anti-whites. Often you will have those that are more or less have some degree of power who push this agenda. Bill Clinton, he was definitely someone who was white, and he gives a speech at a university about our inevitable brown future. And at the same time, when he was president, he pushed for an agenda that was detrimental to our race. It also goes down to the lower level, those poor souls who are basically brainwashed into being such anti-whites that any hint of anything that can be claimed as racist, the R word, they will jump on it. And so it's a broad spectrum of people. It's anybody who's anti-white.
But Tom, you know, I've never understood the end game of this, because whites are creators. They are planners, strategic people. They make things which other races do not appear to do. And if we were now to disappear altogether, would, in my opinion, the world would go back to third world living in huts. You know, not necessarily hunting with spears, but just about that. We'd live in mud huts because there would be no creativity left. I mean, we've seen that in South Africa because the ANC government has made it almost impossible for white people to work. And so the country's falling apart. The electricity supply is finished. I mean, it really is finished. They have rolling blackouts that last a week at a time. The water supply is, I mean, the one town had blood running out of their taps because the abattoirs runoff was running into the water supply. And a town near the coast, the government was pumping seawater straight into the houses because they've just suffered a terrible drought. And the Minister of Water Affairs came out and told them that this is perfectly safe. You can drink it, you can bath in it, you can water your plants with it. It's fine. So, you know, the streets are falling apart. Everything is in a state of collapse because the creative people and the responsible people are no longer there. And it's frightening to see how quickly a country can go from first world to junk status, which is what South Africa has just been declared, And it's absolutely frightening. And in my opinion, it is because they have removed the whites from positions of responsibility.
Yes. If you look around today, you see examples of this. That brown future they're promoting is basically brown people sitting around in huts wearing a loincloth and hungry.
Yes.
And the anti-whites at the very top, I don't know the full reasoning as to why they do it. I do know that they're promoting this white genocide. And from my perspective, the reasons are less important than the resisting of it. Once it's defeated, we can spend all the time in the world finding out what reasons.
Yes.
But they appear to have such a hatred of us for some reason that they're willing to condemn their descendants to a world without us. In other words, they hate us more than they love their own. And I think our greatest strength, which has been to some extent what they've used against us, will be when we learn to love our own more than we hate.
And do you think that is possible for us to do that in time? Because we are under attack worldwide. I mean, the influx of people from Africa into Europe, it is frightening. It really, really is frightening. And it seems that the entire world of other races is determined to wipe out the white race. So do you think that we, as a peaceful, non-gang-forming race, will be able to wake up and stand up and defend ourselves in time to stop our annihilation?
Yes. Our people have that creative ability, and they will rise to the occasion. I can cite not only myself, but many others who've awoken, who were former anti-whites, who were under the spell, or who simply didn't care, but would always, they have awoken, and they've seen what's coming, and they're not going to sit still for it. They will do whatever is necessary. They will commit great sacrifices, any sacrifice, to ensure the survival of our people, of our family, our extended family. I have learned that I am part of a family. I have a history, despite all their altering of it and pretending that we don't have a past. We have a very rich past, something to be proud of. Our race is guilty of no unique sins, but they have always brought unique contributions to the world that has made it a better place.
Yes, absolutely. Because I wonder, if you just look at medicine and the marvels that's wrought, I mean, because of Western medicine, the black races live longer, don't have as many deaths of childbirth, etc., etc. So their population has exploded. But I wonder, had they been left to their own devices, where they would be today. Would they still just be nomadic people wandering behind their herds looking for better pasture? Would the world be a better place?
As it stands now, from the evidence we see, they would have not progressed, because even with the technological equipment in their hands and instructions on how to use it, rather than simply maintaining it, the less white people there are to help them, the quicker they slide back towards those nomadic and primitive roots. They will return to what they are without that assistance. I'm not one way or the other on that, because I don't necessarily think that they necessarily need that type of thing. It's kind of like an ecological approach. I just want the same in return.
Yes.
I'm not going to feed the bears, and I'm not going to expect the bears to feed me.
You, yes. Yes, absolutely. So, in the case of Zimbabwe and South Africa, where they don't seem to see cause and effect, because they're taking the farms away from the farmers or killing them, and now they've got their begging bowl out to the rest of the world because they're starving. So, what is it that they only see today and cannot see that tomorrow we're going to starve if we eat it all today and kill the people who produce the food?
I don't know. It's something about our people who think long term. We plan not only day to day, but weeks, years, and even centuries in advance. We plan for a future we could never possibly hope to live to see. Our race has many unique qualities, and that's one of them. We plan in advance. And we, in our natural state, when someone in the old days planted a tree, that tree would take many years before it bore fruit, and then not much fruit. They weren't planting it for themselves. They were planting it for their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren that they would never see.
Yes, yes. But that is what we do. I think it's a genetic thing that we just do that because I think we'd like to leave the world a better place than we found it.
Yes, if there were just one white person left somewhere, he would spend his time thinking that he could leave the world better off than if he had not have tried. That's part of our makeup, and we will work to that end unless we're completely under the spell and have been lured away from the way we naturally are with hedonistic pursuits or delusions.
Like the fall of the Roman Empire, that was completely hedonistic, was it not? I mean, everything was pleasure. It was great circuses, and the whole thing fell apart. And it would appear to me, and I'm watching the white world today, and it looks like it is exactly the same thing. We've become such a consumer-based society of want, have to have more, have to have better, have to spend more, have to be in debt, that we are unable to see the bigger picture.
Yes, that's part of the blindness that's been inflicted on us with the mental. If we had, if not for this, we would have been thinking about the future more so than we are now, and the world we would leave to our descendants for all time to come. In our natural state, we give great reverence not only to our ancestors, but to our descendants, our future prodigy.
Yes.
Our timeline for us stretches not only back to the beginning, but forward into a never-ending future, with hope that they will have better than we could ever imagine.
Yes, because on a personal level, I wanted my child to have better than I had. I wanted her to go to better schools, have better education, everything better. And I see that she's doing the same thing for her children. So, and that is not a market or commercial based thing. It is simply we want to pass on better, and we will sacrifice for that.
Yes. In our natural state, without the propaganda, we concentrate more on the future than we do on our comforts and enjoyment of today. We look forward to our descendants having a better time, and we naturally assume, without ever thinking about it, that they will think the same way.
And there is where the break in things comes, because of what they are being taught and brainwashed into. They are becoming less able to focus on that, because what they're focusing on is being politically correct, being ashamed of their color, being ashamed of white pride, not having any, really, because it's not a good thing to do. I mean, you can't add white to anything. You can't have the white Chamber of Commerce or white History Month or white anything, because that is definitely racist. And so how do we turn that around so that they become proud of themselves again and productive? Because I think we're going to lose that if our children keep on being taught to be ashamed.
I see many that are learning that. They're relearning that they have a past, that they are a people. And I mean, I see many young people. I've seen what's often termed the alt-right. They don't have any of the traditional conservative values necessarily. Some of them may be very liberal in everything except for the fact that they are pro-white. They've been through the indoctrination. They go to school, they find they're guilty of everything, and then they're told they don't have a future, but we're all the same people. And the contradictions have reached a point where many of them are awakening from it. The sure cure for a love of diversity is a good, healthy dose of that diversity. And as an adverse condition, our people will rise above it.
And Europe is getting a good, healthy dose of that, aren't they? They welcomed this diversity. Now they've become outnumbered by the diversity and are really, some are afraid, but there are groups rising up and saying, no, this is our country. We are white, and we have a right to be here, and you have no right to come here and rape and loot and steal and live off our taxes. And they've stood up and said, no more, get out. Of course, the world, the politically correct world, is not very happy about that, and they're being labeled Nazis and neo-Nazis and skinheads and who knows what. But I'm very glad to see that there are groups standing up and saying, no, I don't care what the government says. I don't care what Angela Merkel says. We, the people, do not accept this.
Yes. The tactic I always use, and I believe it would work in most countries, is, in your opinion, I'm a Nazi, racist, whatever. You're only saying that because I'm white. Anti-racist is just a code word for anti-white. That's a way the average person can defend themselves without getting in trouble. And it has more layers than is readily apparent. By the, in your opinion, you're stating that this is a personal opinion. And if they're saying something should be done to you based on their just an opinion, well, you see what type of person they are. And the other is you're pointing out the fact that this so-called racism is only for white people, because in many countries, bad things can happen to you under the law if you say, so what, I'm a racist. You're not exactly saying you are or aren't. You're not on the defensive. You're on the attack.
Yes. I absolutely agree with you. And you told me the other day that you have a way of saying not white people, our race, our, and that tends to pull the person in as part of you, part of us. We're a group, which you are part of. So immediately you are putting them in a friendly way.
Yes. No one has ever questioned what race I am when I say that. They pretty much know this. If someone does ask what race I am, other than perhaps a child or something, it would be an anti-white. Only an anti-white would be so silly as to ask what race I am, because they know very well the answer to that question.
Yes.
And the white race is one of those loaded terms. Television, movies have so often slipped it in as the evil white race, doing some sort of white supremacy act.
Yes.
That as soon as you use that terminology, not only is it dehumanizing, it distances you from your people, but it sets up a barrier. You transport them through time, back to when that was first instilled in them. And you never want to transport a potential ally, someone who can awaken and be on your side, back to the point when they were programmed to be an anti-racist, a.k.a. have anti-white leanings. Yes.
I absolutely agree with you. And you said that you try not at all to use the word white. You use our people. As you said,
Except when I'm diffusing it.
Yes.
I can say our race, the white race, and I've diffused it before I clarified it.
Yes. Yeah. And you also say we don't use the word racist.
No, it's the R word. I only use it when I'm pointing out the contradiction, that this word racist only applies to white people, and that it applies to every white person, period. If it requires a qualifier like reverse racism, then it's not a word designed for us. An Asian, when he claims racism, doesn't have to qualify it. Blacks don't. Hispanics don't. Only white people. So that shows the word does not cover us. That's why the term anti-white, it's very self-explanatory, and it's our terminology, and it will mean what we want it to mean. The same as our enemy uses the R word to mean whatever they want it to mean at the time.
Yes. Hello, caller from the unknown number. You're live on air with Radio Free South Africa. Did you have a question or a comment?
I'm a Nazi, and I endorsed this Nazi group called the National Socialist Underground. And sorry I hurt people's feelings about the whole pro-Nazi commentary here, but I'm telling you the honest truth, folks. I am pro-National Socialist, all right? Let me take some that happen to be skinheads. So unfreaking believable. And, of course, the Schlagen, Schlagen, Volkswagen, Sieg worldwide.
Oh, yeah? So
it wouldn't be a complete call without someone, some anti-white pretending to be pro-white, but yet not understanding what pro-white is.
Yes, it is not neo-Nazi at all. It is not a let's get rid of everybody else because we're white and we want to rule the world. It is simply a expression of pride in ourselves and our race.
Yes, and the desire for our race to continue. And this is perfectly natural. This is the way nature made everything.
Yes, and Tom, also, people left to themselves tend to segregate into their own groups, do they not?
Yes. And you will never hear when a group of blacks, Asians, or Hispanics congregate together, that they're being racist because they're separating. But you see a lunch table in a school full of all white people, and immediately they will get called racist.
Yes, yes. But the other table full of other color people, the Japanese people or the Chinese people or the black people have also congregated together. There seems to be no problem with that.
No, this diversity they push, not only is it a genocidal scam, it means fewer white people. You never hear when, say, a non-white church that doesn't have any white people needs diversity. You will hear, however, some self-hating white preacher who will bemoan the fact that his mostly white congregation needs diversity. It just means fewer white people and is chasing down the last white person anywhere.
And we are doing it. We are allowing this to be done to us.
Yes, our people, as you pointed out, with their inventiveness and their ability to rise, have real power. In our countries, for the most part, we are not victims. We have the power. We're just not exercising it. It's like a lion tamer. The person, in an event of a lion tamer, the one with the real power is the lion. He's just been conned by the lion tamer into thinking that the lion tamer has the power, and all the lion tamer is doing is exercising the power, but he doesn't have it. If the lion ever figures out that he's the one with the real power, he can do anything he wants, and it need not be violent. He can simply walk off and fail to obey.
I love that analogy, because we have the power to do that. Refuse to obey. Refuse to be politically correct. And as I understand it, Tom, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, I believe that is what you are doing. You are just refusing to have any part of this political correctness and this white is not right thing that's going on. And you are on a road trip to say just that, aren't you?
Yes, at every opportunity, and I'm busy decorating my truck at every opportunity against the to promote awareness that white genocide is coming, and it's here now, because any attempt is how genocide is defined. Once they've, we have a group of elites that at some level have produced textbooks that promote it. Before those textbooks went into print, someone had to say it at a very high level. Who that is, I don't know. But now you have a generation raised in the belief of white genocide as a political correct doctrine. And if you wanted to destroy a people with power, the only way to do it really would be to raise a generation under your propaganda, and they would destroy it for you.
And it's working, is it not? It is working perfectly.
To some extent, but there's a glitch in the program now. Anytime a new information media becomes available, originally it was the printing press that sparked revolts and revolutions all across the world. A very crude and primitive fax machine was responsible for spreading a message, pointing out the inconsistencies that brought the workers' paradise, a.k.a. communism in the Soviet Union, down, and the Berlin Wall fell, without a shot being fired for all intents and purposes. And now we have the greatest media ever, the Internet. And more people are waking up to this. you will see the old power structure trying to get it in hand, and they're either closing comments to their stories or they're so heavily moderating them that nothing gets shown on time for the comment sections. They're in damage control mode, and they're only that way because of how strong our message is and how much power it's gaining.
Do you think that is why there is such a concerted attempt to shut down the internet, to control it, to stop us?
Oh, yes. And I think it's too late. You have people now that really don't trust the system. They've seen that everything that comes out of the system is a lie. And they're not going to stop just because it has reached that level. I know a fella who, because of some simple activism that was done on Twitter, it made, and it was Boycott Star Wars 7, I believe. It made over 5,000 online publications, most of them mentioning white genocide, to the point this fellow lives in a cabin in the woods with just bare electricity, and he was out splitting wood listening to his AM radio station, and he heard white genocide come over the radio. He didn't think that he would ever hear what I was saying come over the radio like that.
Yes.
Granted, most often they will clamp down on that message. They don't want it getting out. But any time that happens to someone splitting wood in a cabin, that message is already spread far and wide, and it's too late for them to put it back in the bottle.
I definitely agree with that, because without social media, the white people of South Africa would have no voice, because the press is basically owned by the ANC, and they have very strict laws about what they may and may not publish and what they may and may not say. So they would have no voice. Oh, the media as well, the radio, the TV, all of those things are quasi-statal. So they would have absolutely no voice to the outside world to tell them what is going on in their country, because media outside of South Africa has certainly just forgotten about South Africa since 1994, when Mandela became president. Suddenly, everything was great in South Africa, and they don't even look that way anymore. Now, those people definitely need the internet and social media in order to tell the world that they are suffering, and they need help, and they are being killed at a rate of knots. But 20 years ago, they would not have been able to get this word out to the world. And I do think that that's part of the strategy, is to keep it quiet, keep it under wraps, and make it work in South Africa, so that was the blueprint for everywhere else. It worked. The media was silent. The murders and rapes continued. Nobody knew anything about it. And so now it's spread everywhere else, much faster than it happened in South Africa. But those people have a voice now, and boy, are they ever using it. It is amazing to me how many show hosts welcome me to speak about this subject, where I don't think, without social media talking about it and them having some knowledge about it, they wouldn't be so eager to discuss the subject, because it's politically incorrect. So social media and the internet is definitely the lifeline that these people are hanging on to.
Yes, this is something our race does very well. The system we're under is designed to be a closed system. Limited resources, we all have to, carbon credits, etc. And it's all to keep us in our box. Our race doesn't do in the box. And the internet is one example. A few companies started something that was going to be just a minor event, a minor technological marvel. But to a large extent, it was individuals who expanded on it, began writing programs that were open sourced. There are whole computer systems now that were basically written by somebody to simply expand the usefulness of the Internet and make it easier, quicker, and faster. And our race did that. They're thinking in their natural state, which is there is no box, and we won't be in it.
Yes, yes. We are coming up to a station break, Tom, so you have time to get yourself a cup of tea or something. We'll be back in about 4 minutes.
Aye.
Today,
if I could save just one couple from the mess that is South Africa, I would feel that my life had been worthwhile, because they are so endangered there. The whole white race is endangered, but it began as a blueprint in South Africa. And those 3.5 or so million white people are really, really under siege. But what you've just said about people standing up is exactly what is happening there. There are people, and I'm very, very proud to say I know one of the heroes of that lot. She and her husband herself were in dire, dire circumstances. They lost their jobs due to the anti-white laws in South Africa, and they were evicted from their house, etc. So they had literally nothing. They were living in their car. And they looked around them, and they saw how many people were in those same circumstances. Now, you have to understand that being on the streets in South Africa for a white person is a death sentence, because these marauding gangs, and they really do that, there's never less than 4 of them, and now it's gotten bigger. So they're coming in gangs of about 16. You cannot fight against them. You can't defend yourself against that many. And so it's a death sentence to be on the streets. So this young couple who had nothing, when they got part-time jobs, they looked around them and said, wow, now we now have a room to stay in, and we are better off than these people around us. So they went out and founded a charity group, which cannot be, well, at that stage, they could not register it in South Africa, because you are not allowed to have a white charity that deals with white people. If you do this kind of work, you must do it for 90% black. Well, they just said they're not going to do that. They're doing this for their own people who are getting no aid from the government, no aid from the Red Cross, no aid from UNICEF, no aid from anywhere. They need help. And this young couple, they formed this charity. First it was just themselves. And they had beat up, battered old car. And in every spare minute they had, they would go around and beg for their friends for donations of food and clothing for the people worse off than them. And then a volunteer joined them, and then now they are countrywide. There are 485 camps that we know of, but we've just discovered about 5 new ones. We don't know how many there really are. And we don't know the exact number of whites living in these camps. And they also help people who are one step away from the camps. They still have a house, but that's all they have. They don't have electricity or running water because it's been switched off, and they are hanging on by a thread. So this charity helps all of those people, and it has grown enormously to help as many as they can. So what you are saying about white people standing up and doing the right thing, rescuing and saving people around them, is absolutely correct, because this young couple, they really, really deserve sainthood for what they do, because they do it without a salary. They do not take money out of the charity. They do not take food out of the charity. They live in one room, and they do this 24/7 to help their fellow human beings. And that is what our race is capable of. We do it without a second thought.
Yes, and we do it in unexpected ways.
Yes.
We try it again and again. Our race has, to use an example, flight. for thousands of years, our race not only dreamed of flight, they believed they could accomplish it. There were always many people who knew and worked their life with what tools they had, and until modern time, or relatively modern times, eventually achieved it. But we knew we could do the impossible. Flight was impossible, and we did it. What those people did was impossible, and they've done it.
Yes.
We will always get out of the box.
Well, that brings me back to the voortrekkers, the Boers who left the Cape Colony and went into the great unknown because it had never been charted, never been set foot on by white people, and no maps or nothing. They put everything they owned in a wagon, and off they went into the great unknown with lions and cheetahs and all of those things that we have in South Africa that were roaming the veldt, and of course the Zulus who were attacking them in their thousands. And off they went. They have the spirit of adventure, of exploration, of doing things and going where no man's been before. And they are amazing people. I mean, the Americans did that too. They took their wagons and they went west into the great unknown, looking for a better future, which comes back to what you said in the first half of the show. We want a better future for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, etc., down the line. And these people, I mean, they were amazing. They faced incredible odds. My biggest thing is these Boers who had to cross the Drakensberg, which is the Dragon Mountains, which stretches almost the whole way across South Africa, sort of cutting it in half. They had to take their wagons apart, and they had to pull everything up this enormous snow-clad mountain with leather thongs, which they used to pull the things up, lower them down the other side, put them all together again, and then go on their way. They were not daunted by this huge barrier of mountain that was in their path. They just said, well, we can do this, and we're going to do it. And they did do it, as you just said. And to me, that is one. There were many battles and things that are amazing. But that is my picture of strength, endurance, courage, and determination. Take everything you own and pull it up an enormous snow-topped mountain with pieces of leather, and then lower it down on the other side, including your animals and your children. Wow, I mean, what a thing to do. It's amazing. And that is our race is capable of that kind of thing, whereas others would just say, "Oh my goodness, no, this, there's this huge, impossible barrier in front of us." And in fact, that kept the blacks on the other side of it because they were not prepared to try and cross this mountain. So it is an absolute picture for me of what we do and what other races will not do.
And even when they arrived, the area they arrived in, of what became South Africa and Rhodesia, was not the most hospitable part of Africa, the African continent, by a long shot.
No, not at all.
And rather than conform to the environment, they made the environment conform to them.
Yes. Tom, they were battling things like the tsetse fly and the malaria mosquitoes, and wow, I mean, they just, as I say, and all the wild animals, plus the black hordes that wanted to slaughter them, because they never went in huge groups, there weren't lots of them, and they were just amazing people. And I know that here in America the parallel is exactly there. Exactly, they did the same thing at approximately the same time in history. But these people, as you say, they did not say, okay, well, this is thorny bushveld and we can't get through this mass of thorny trees and we're just going to stay where we are. No, they thought the grass was probably greener on the other side, and they made their way through it. And as you say, they made the country conform to their needs, not themselves conform to this harsh, inhospitable country. Because we have an area called the Karoo, which is semi-desert. And I drove through it once at midday. And I tell you, it was like driving into an oven. You could hardly breathe because it was so hot. And yet, the Afrikaner Boers have turned that terrible, dry, desert wasteland into an incredibly productive place. They farm merino sheep there, which have the softest, most beautiful wool. And in those harsh, arid, horrible hot conditions, they still make it work. So I admire the durability of people.
Yes, they came to an area, and rather than accepting it as it was and making an existence, they sacrificed their comforts, any comforts they may have had, to better the area, to make it more livable for those who would come after. They brought irrigation to the desert areas, and they turned someplace like Rhodesia from more or less a semi-barren land into what became the breadbasket of South Africa.
I just wonder sometimes, Tom, whether we, as people today, have I know we have the ability, but do we have the determination to do that? We spoke in the previous show, before we disappeared off the air, about survival skills. Now, those people were taught them from an early age because that is what they had to do. They knew how to hunt, how to feed themselves, how to slaughter, how to grow crops, how to shear sheep, how to make wool, how to knit, to sew, to make flowers grow. They knew all of those things because they were taught that from birth. But we are not. We know that you go to the shop and you get your food and you bring it home and you put it in the fridge, and so we don't have that keen survival edge that they had. And do you think that we could relearn that? Because it looks as if we're going to have to.
Not only do I think we can learn that, I think many of those skills are out there and perhaps scattered about. I believe if you took 10,000 of our people at random and put them someplace without anything other than what they had on them at the time, they would suffer tremendous losses as they adapted. But there would be enough knowledge to basically start making tools, growing gardens, and making the beginnings of an early civilization. I even expect with the knowledge they have of what was done in the past, they would do what we normally do. Now knowing it is possible and has been done, that they would reinvent metalworking within a generation and within a century have fine steel and be fully on the way up again. This is what our people do.
If we were allowed to.
Yes.
I know we're breaking out of the box, but at the same time, we do live in a very repressive society worldwide, and we. There are many things we are not allowed to do because, I saw the other day that a guy in America is in huge trouble for collecting rainwater in a barrel. Another one is in trouble because he built a pond on his property, etc. So they're closing in on us and not allowing us to be survivalist. I heard in Florida a guy had gone off the grid and was not connected to the electricity or water supply. He was living his way, which was much cheaper, and he was very happy with it. But he was also fined and arrested for that because you were not allowed to break out of the box. So how do you foresee that we can do this for ourselves without going to jail?
To some extent, I see them as doing this to make examples. But there are many people that are successfully breaking out of the box. Using the internet, you can actually look up sites where they're exchanging information on how to do this.
Yes.
So that everyone's experience is shared. And you see in some cases where people have had to start over from scratch. And not only are they homesteading in a very traditional way, you'll see their children, as they were in the past, taking care of the animals, learning basic farm work, and even fixing things that most adults today wouldn't have a clue as to how to tackle.
Yes, we are very much a discarded society, aren't we? If it gives a problem and doesn't work properly, well, just throw it away. We're not a fix-it society.
Yes, in the mainstream, but I believe there are more of our people starting to learn this than one might expect. If you take us overall, it appears there are a tremendous number of people who are afraid to rock the boat, who will not think outside of the box, and who will be lost. But in every sinking ship, there are lifeboats, and not everyone can necessarily have the ability to navigate or launch those lifeboats. We can't save the world, but we will try.
Yes. Yes, we will. But you know, we come back to the whole our people, white people thing. It appears that the powers that be, I can't talk about they because people always ask, who are they? The powers that be are trying to squeeze us back into the box because they see, with the advent of the internet, etc., we are becoming restive. The natives are becoming restless and don't want to be in that box anymore and are tired of their lives being intruded on in every single area. I mean, the powers that be are everywhere in your life. They're trying to control everything you think, everything you do, everything you buy. I mean, it's ridiculous. But at the same time, they are putting so many controls in place to keep us little brainwashed, politically correct people in the matrix, you know? And so breaking out is very difficult.
Yes, it's designed to be difficult. But remember, anytime they have to go through all these draconian measures, they're on the defensive. They no longer control the message to the point where they can just sit back and let this white genocide progress naturally. They've had to take all of these extreme measures because our people are starting to come at least to the awareness that something is horribly wrong and the system is not sustainable.
Yes.
And that puts them on the defensive. They've got a clock on their head. And when you have a clock on your head against an inventive people who have a history and a natural tendency of getting out of that box, you're in a bad shape because our enemy doesn't, at the top, have a history of being able to control us long term.
Yes. So, okay, this militarization of the police and all of these things, I mean, that is really designed to put the fear of God into us so that we just immediately comply. But as you said, more and more people are getting angry. I think, Tom, you can feel the simmering anger in the people. They know how life was, how their parents' life was, how the country was, and they are angry that that is not how it is anymore, that they don't have those freedoms of everything, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of association. It's trying to be taken away from them. And you feel the simmering anger in people. And I wonder, it wouldn't be a good thing for them to rise up and get violent, but it appears that violence is the only way that is going to get us out of this.
Well, in the old Soviet Union, they spread the message pointing out how things really were despite all the propaganda. Everybody sort of knew, so to say, that the emperor had no clothes. But they really didn't to some extent, because they would always repeat the party line that had been drilled into them, that this is the workers' paradise. Well, once the message had spread far enough, people started literally taking to the streets. And the Soviet Union had no problem with killing vast numbers of its own people to prevent a revolution. The reason why they couldn't is because that message had spread. The military was starting to balk. The system is kept in check by sound, by propaganda.
Yes.
And once that propaganda is broken far and deep enough, not even those who enforce it, say the militarized police within our own countries, will back it. The elites will have very little choice but to either negotiate or go for broke. And the last time they went for broke was during the French Revolution that turned into a full-scale revolt. And I don't think they want the guillotines to come out.
Yeah, I believe. If you believe what you read, we have ordered thousands of guillotines in this country. It's actually a very frightening thought. But, yes, I saw this in South Africa because it crept up on us slowly. The restrictions on our lives, the restrictions on our working ability, the restrictions on everything we could do crept up on us very slowly. So you didn't really notice it. It became one by one just part of your life until you were living in a prison that you would put yourself in because you needed it for safety, and living in fear 24 hours a day. But you don't even notice that because it becomes such a natural thing. It's just a way of life. And the first time that I realized how much fear I had been carrying was when I came to the States and slowly could let go of this awful fear of rape and murder. Now, that is not a condition people should live in, but if you have them in that state, they are firstly not communicating with each other because they live in their self-inflicted prisons and they're scared, and so you're keeping them isolated from each other, and there you have them totally under your control.
Yes. Essentially, it became self-censoring at some point. The fear helped promote a sort of self-censoring, and you see that with political correctness in the United States, where people won't say what they think, afraid of being called a name, because these names can have real repercussions even without the force of law. They took the Chairman Mao's political correctness and moved it into the boardroom. So anybody who gets called the R word or any of its kindred can expect to be fired from their job, harassed endlessly.
Yes. I can give you examples of that too, because that is the way this year started in South Africa. It is a tradition or for the black people to go and cleanse themselves in the sea on New Year's Day. It's a traditional thing. So they flock to the coast in their mega millions. I mean, if you've seen pictures of Durban Beach at New Year, there was not a centimeter of space on that beach. It was just black as far as you could see. So, and they had to bring bulldozers in afterwards. They could not clean that beach because there was so much human feces all over it that they had to bring the bulldozers in to clean it up. And so a white lady, supposedly, because there's questions now about whether she even exists, but there was this so on Facebook, she said that they behave like monkeys. Well, one of the radio personalities said, well, people don't understand free speech. He was harassed. He had been chosen as a judge on Idols. He was thrown out of there. He was thrown out of his job. He was fired. He was harassed. They arrested him. He's got a criminal case against him for saying people don't understand free speech. He never said anything wrong. And then another person, a bank person, also said, I don't know, something really innocuous, really, really innocuous. And he was high up in the bank, and he got fired. So as you say, you don't know what you're going to say or do that is going to have you accused of the R word and put you in jail. So now they're making incredibly strict laws about racist comments, and you will go to jail for them. But they only apply to white people because the government says that black people cannot be racist. By definition, they cannot be. So it is incredible how they are doing these things to us.
Yes, even in the United States, where we think we have freedom of speech, we really don't. If you're afraid to say something for whatever reason, well, you don't have freedom of speech. In the Soviet Union, you had freedom of speech, but nobody needed to tell you what would happen to you after you exercised that freedom of speech. With the American Freedom Party's campaign, not other than just a very couple, we cannot rent a billboard to promote white survival and the betterment of white people because the billboard companies use a vague community guidelines, and they only do this in regards to white people. So we're effectively silenced by political correctness.
Yes.
And our documents that we hold so dear that specifically grants us this right, the reason that was the first guarantee is because the Founding Fathers didn't want to limit speech. They would rather have speech that they found objectionable. Freedom of speech is not for state-sponsored or popular speech. They don't need protection. It's for the unpopular opinion. In other words, it applies to dissidents, not to the mainstream. That's who it was for.
Because they themselves were dissidents, were they not?
Yes, and they faced literally a death penalty for saying and doing what they did.
Exactly. So they were protecting it. We come back to where you're making it better for future generations. They were protecting future generations forever and ever with that statement. Now, the South African Constitution is held up as the most incredible, best constitution in the entire world. But nobody in power believes it applies to them. So it says that everybody is equal, the same as yours does. But some are more equal than others, because in that Bill of Rights of South Africa, everybody is equal, except they have an exception there, except where it will help the previously disadvantaged. Now, if you already put an exception in something, then it's not a rule, is it?
No. There's only one in our Constitution statement of what our country was founded for and what the Constitution is there for. It's in the preamble, where it says, for ourselves and our posterity.
Yes.
And yet this is ignored. Our enemies haven't tried to subvert just parts of the Constitution. They've basically thrown out the whole thing and are ignoring the very statement of what it exists for.
And you know, Tom, America was an incredible experiment, and it was very, very successful for 200 years or so. And people want to go back to that. People want the freedom that they had. They don't want to live in fear. And I don't want to see them live in the fear that white South Africans live in. I mean, it is, not having done it, you will never understand that burden of fear that you live with all the time. And I see the people around me here becoming a little bit edgy and flighty because they fear everything. They fear saying the wrong thing. You don't know what the wrong thing is anymore. And it's just not the way the world should be.
Yes, currently we have a system where nobody, no country anymore in our former white nations has claimed white people. They always promote other races, but no one has came out and said, you know, we like our white children. We want to keep them that way. And if a country does that, if they claim us, they will see white flight towards that country, provided they're permitted, that will tear down this system all through Anglosphere, because our people will vote with their feet and our enemies will lose all power.
Yes. Now, there I absolutely agree with you, because the aim of the Afrikaners in South Africa is self-determination. It always has been, and I think it always will be. All they've ever wanted is a place that they could call their own, live safely, live their lives with their ethics, their morals, their religion, their way of life, their language, and just be left alone. And that is still what they want. But the ANC government is never going to allow them to vote with their feet, because although they are only about 5 to 8% of the population, they pay 80-something% of the taxes. So the government is never going to let their tax base walk away and take their money with them.
Yes, countries like the United States, by their silence, are committing consent to what's happening to those people. The United States, or even England or Germany, could send in not much more than a battalion of crack Marines and get those people to safety, and there would be nothing they could do about it. But by ignoring it, by pretending it's not happening, they are adding their consent by the silence.
But Tom, it was the USA and the UK that sold white South Africans down the river and turned the country over to the communist government we have now. It was all those liberal anti-white people standing up, waving their lighters and singing Kumbaya, and we're not going to South Africa, and boycott South Africa, with no understanding of what really was happening in South Africa. None whatsoever. But they are responsible for what's happening there, and they cannot look at it now and say, we were wrong, we need to help these people.
Yes, in the early days, the government knew full well what this would lead to. But many people that have been propagandized didn't. A biblical phrase that comes up is true in this case. My people die for a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
And if the truth were known, there would be much less of this. There would have been no end to this system that really benefited everybody in some degree or another. But
yes.
Now the place is collapsing, and the white South Africans are on genocide watch.
Yes. They're on stage 6 of 8 stages of genocide. Stage 6 being preparation. And you can see, especially, it is so scary, Tom, this year, the deaths have escalated to one a day. One a day this year. It is horrifying because if you think about the size of South Africa, if that were happening here in Texas, one white person a day was being tortured to death, there would be an outcry of note, and that's not even talking about how many attacks there were. When people don't die, they actually survive it. I mean, there would be an outcry of note. It is a humanitarian crisis what is going on there, and still nobody's taking notice or paying attention or helping. Maybe they're looking, but they're certainly not helping.
I would say they're covering it up. The few times I've heard South Africa mentioned on radio, it has usually been referred to as a rainbow nation. They're blatantly lying to keep people convinced. And in the United States, and I'm sure other formerly mostly white countries, they're referred to as this is the rainbow nation.
Yes.
That's their plan for all of our former nations, to turn the majority non-white, and probably an accelerated finishing off.
Well, you know, Tom, I and many others keep saying that South Africa was the blueprint for the rest of the world. And if you look at it now, you will see exactly that, because they are having decolonized and de-whited, if you can use a word like that, Africa as a whole, because the biggest population of natural-born citizen whites in Africa is in South Africa. It's the biggest population of whites left. So they've swept through the entire continent, which is huge, de-whited it, wiped it out, and now look at it. Now they're flowing out of there in their hundreds of thousands to those hated white oppressive countries.
Yes, that's one of the inconsistencies. The non-white world will flood into any white country that they can and then scream that they're oppressed.
Yes.
Through most of the world, this is not natural. They could go to another non-white country if they were truly seeking desperation, but they have countries of preference, and they're promoted countries, and they're white countries.
Yes. And you know, once they get there, then they start screaming about, well, this is not our normal food. We don't want this food. And, the Red Cross is giving us food packages that have a cross on. Well, that isn't against our religion, so we won't eat the food. We'll throw it in the street. And, well, you know, I've got this problem. I haven't had sex for a while, and, you know, I have a great sex drive, so I just have to rape everybody that comes in sight. I don't understand it. I just do not understand it. If they were refugees, they would be grateful for every ounce of help they are getting. But they're not. This country is too cold, so I'm leaving here and going somewhere else. Or this country doesn't give enough benefits, so I want to go to Germany. I mean, refugees, my lily white backside, you know, really.
Yes, and then you have the white leaders in these countries. Anytime a big massacre or something occurs, claiming that they're shocked. Well, they end up claiming this almost every month. How often can you be shocked? They're fully aware of what's going to happen. Yes.
But Tom, don't they see that they're also white? So do they not see that this mass genocide of whites includes them?
Some don't. Some do, and they're simply profiting. They're traders in the truest sense, and they understand, but as long as it makes their life better, they're willing to be traders. When Dante's Inferno came out, no one doubted that the worst level of hell was reserved for traitors. And these people are basically traitors. They've sold out their own. And below them are a step of those who are truly brainwashed. And they will never see where this leads, even when it's pointed out to them. True information means nothing to someone who's brainwashed.
Yes, yes.
Oftentimes, even when it kicks them right in the butt.
Well, you know, this liberal family who took 100 refugees to live on their property, and gee whiz, these refugees threatened them and stole from their house and broke down things and cut down their trees. And, oh, my goodness, how can this be happening to us? We're such good people. And even then, they still don't see it. They just see that, oh, well, these are rotten apples, but the rest of them must be okay. They refuse to see it. I don't know if that's cognitive dissonance, but quite honestly, to me, it is just stupidity, sheer raving lunacy. I can't understand it.
Yes, they are very much under the spell. I've seen it in many different ways, where somehow or another they can't see the truth. That's what brainwashing does to a large extent. It doesn't teach you so much what to see as what never to see. And until something, and some people are too far gone, they will never be able to see the truth. They are lost to us. They were, in effect, killed spiritually, mentally, before they ever had a chance to develop. I don't really have any tears to shed for them when something bad happens to them, because I shed my tears that what was done to them, that they were never allowed to live. And those who awaken are the ones that I know joy from, because they've reclaimed their self, they've reclaimed their spirit, their independence, and their mind when they were told never to think for themselves, to never be a true person. So I no longer have sadness, but more joy at all of the awakenings I see progressing, where people truly begin to live and care.
You know, one of the things I really admire about my husband is a thing that he lives by, is question everything. Everything. You know, not trust but verify, question everything. And that is so awake, that it's startling, you know. If we could all think like that, we'd be free in no time.
Yes, and any time I see information come out, particularly along the mainstream, I ask, why was this information produced?
Yep, what's hiding
behind it?
behind
And then I ask what they hid in the silence.
Yes.
What didn't they talk about?
Yes, because always there's some other story that they're covering up and not allowing to be out. You know, it seems as if the media get together at midnight and they all decide, okay, our story for the day is X, Y, Z. And they blast you with 24 hours. It's amazing. The news media do not report news. They just regurgitate some story that came from somewhere, and they all do the same thing. I mean, that plane that disappeared. Were you not sick to death of the plane? That's all you heard for about 3 weeks. There was nothing else happening in the world, according to our news media.
Well, much of the media are the true believers who can never awaken and never see the truth. A couple of years ago, there was a Asian flight that crashed, and someone trolled them. Basically, they called in as a prank to give them false information. And because they're so conditioned to never see beyond their limited script, you had reporters on the news reporting some of those lost in the Asian plane crash as "we too low," holy folk, and they never understood what they were saying.
No, they all just said it. and wrote it and never even gave it a second thought. And when a thinking person looked at it, they cracked up laughing.
Yeah.
I mean, I fell on the floor laughing when I read it. I thought it must be an April Fool's type thing. And yet they were reporting it seriously.
Yes, the reporters couldn't see it. They're too far gone to ever process true information, and they couldn't believe someone would do this to them.
Yes. I don't think they even read what they write or read what they're reporting. Because honestly, the rubbish they start is beyond laughable. And yet, the dulled masses just listen and nod their heads, you know. It's frightening, Tom. It really is frightening.
You know, when I talk about the white genocide that's going on and the betterment of my people and preserving my people, immediately you have a knee-jerk reaction from many people who will accuse me of being the R word, a racist.
Yes, yes.
And in nowhere did it say that I disliked other people, but they will think that because I'm for my people, that I'm some way hateful of other races, but they would never question any other race for supporting their own. They're conditioned to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You said something very profound there. I just find it unbelievable that, as you say, that knee-jerk reaction, immediately, without thinking.